We will never turn our back on a single Scot.
We've got to wrestle with those challenges.
This is the same nonsense we have heard time and time again.
This is our country. Let's fix it together.
And welcome to another Planet Holyrood. I'm Paul Hutchin, political editor of the Daily Record. I'm joined this week by Ben Borland, who's the editor of the Scottish Daily Express, and of course Hannah Roger, who's the political editor of the Sunday Mail. Before we turn to the by-election, Ben, I spoke to a Tory councillor yesterday who is a fan of the podcast and singled you out for praise.
Did he really?
He said he thought you were very good, so I thought it was sickening to hear, but congratulations.
Well, there you go. Thank you very much to the mystery Tory councillor. I'm surprised Paul speaks to Tories in his spare time, but there you go.
What can I say? You know, you're popular amongst the Lib Dems and the Conservatives. No Nat has yet said a nice thing about you.
That's not surprising, perhaps.
You're probably quite pleased about that.
No, well, you maybe just, they're just more bashful about
Maybe they're
singing my
secret
praises.
fans.
Yeah.
Right, so let's talk about the Hamilton, Larkhall and Stonehouse by-election. I wrote a story last week which has had quite a lot of traction. Reform put out a pretty horrible online ad which basically accused Anas Sarwar of saying that he will prioritise Pakistani communities. Anas Sarwar hit back by saying that the advert was blatantly racist. John Swinney also jumped in and his party made a formal complaint to Meta about the ad. Just when we thought maybe the story was dying down, Nigel Farage gave it fresh wind by playing the entire video at a press conference, and then that sort of fueled it even more. So before we come on to this, before we discuss it, we're just going to listen to Anas Sarwar's reaction to what Reform did.
What a poisonous little man Nigel Farage is. I've just seen him on the TV this morning claiming that I've introduced sectarianism into Scottish politics. I've been fighting against sectarianism all my adult life. And let's just think about this man, Nigel Farage. While I was working in Scotland's NHS in one of the most deprived communities in the country, he was on the Brussels gravy train. And while I'm campaigning to change our NHS, he wants to privatise our NHS. He's a pathetic little man that knows nothing about Scotland, doesn't understand Scotland, doesn't care about Scotland, and frankly, Scotland's going to reject him.
So, it was a horrible advert. What they accused Anas Sarwar of saying, he didn't say, and this is turning into an ugly, nasty and bitter campaign.
Yeah, I think so, but I just think, Anas Sarwar should not be having to basically defend himself against blatantly racist accusations. I think that if you actually look at the video that Reform are claiming, well, for a start, Reform are claiming in their advert, it says Anas Sarwar says he will prioritise Pakistani communities. Then when Reform have been actually asked about this, they've admitted that the phrase prioritise Pakistani communities is their own phrase, and it's not a quote from Anas, even though I'm pretty sure they know that the advert makes it look as if it is Anas's own words. Even if he did say that, that's not a problem. But if you actually look at what he was saying, which is, the clip is taken from a speech in 2022 where he was speaking, I think, at like a South Asian community meeting or dinner or something, and he's talking about the fact that, Scotland now is a place where people of ethnic minorities are not excluded from politics. They are, members of every political party, and that's a good thing. And I think most people would accept that that's a really good thing, that we have like a diverse political landscape. It's the opposite of what Nigel Farage is claiming. But then, so we've gone from these accusations of racism to then yesterday Nigel Farage saying that it's Anas Sarwar's trying to bring sectarianism into politics. I mean, it's just ridiculous. But as Nigel Farage is very good at, any publicity is good publicity for him. So we, are helping him out once again because we're still talking about this. This advert was first, I think, put up online. I want to say the 7th of May, but it might be the 12th of May. I can't remember the exact date. But, it was weeks ago that this first emerged. And now we're still talking about it weeks and weeks later. And people are still heeding, that message that is contained within the advert, even though it's false. No matter how many times we say that this is not what Anas Sarwar said, Nigel Farage will be chuffed because we're still repeating that phrase, prioritise Pakistani communities, which is not what Anas Sarwar said.
Not even close.
No. But he, I think he knows that will generate reaction. He knows that it'll get people talking. He knows that it'll get reform publicity, which is what he wants.
I think, wasn't the message that he was saying more people should come forward to be politicians from the South Asian community? He said more people.
Yeah, I think he was basically saying no longer will marginalised communities might not be marginalised; they'll be in positions of power.
So I'm just splitting hairs really. It wasn't so much saying we're in a great position. He was saying we want more of you guys out there to enter politics.
Yeah.
I mean, what he didn't say was I will prioritise one
he
particular community. It was just there's
he
no
was
way you
talking
could
about
extrapolate
getting
that meaning.
minorities into politics.
Yeah.
It's nothing to do with prioritising a certain group over another in society. I mean, it's very bizarre to spin it that way. But anyway,
It is. I mean, I think one thing I would say is Reform. They're a new party. They're a rapidly growing party. They've got a lot of money pouring in. They've probably got quite a big social media team. And whoever made this video, we don't know at what level it was signed off. Farage is kind of quite a hands-off sort of leader. I imagine he'd never seen this before. The social media team maybe produced this video, put it out there at quite a sort of junior level, and it's created this.
Or it could be locally somebody in Hamilton.
Or it could be locally someone in Hamilton. It could be. I mean,
I'm not convinced by that. If you look at the meta stats, they spent up to 15 grand on it. So I'm not convinced that local folk in Reform are getting that sort of money to play with. I think that is spent centrally in London.
Centrally in London, but then they get millions in. 15 grand out of a multi-million pound social media budget may not be that significant.
It doesn't seem like an isolated mistake to spend that amount of money on one ad. Seems to be pushing it hard.
I think the thing with Farage though is he once it's done, it's done. He can't then back down. He's got to. I mean, the phrase from American politics: "Don't back down, double down." Mm-hmm. He can't say, "Yeah, that video was a mistake." He has to then defend it and go on the attack because.
Did he have to play it again during a press conference that everyone was going to be watching?
I mean, he certainly knows how to go on the attack, and he's maybe thinking, look, I can't possibly apologise and admit the video was wrong. I could maybe, soft soap it and try and, or I can just go all in, play it again, and then say, right, everyone, what did you all think of it? And then describe Anas Sarwar as sectarian. So he's really up the ante.
Yeah.
But also he knows, whether it was by accident or by design, he knows this video is making an impact. So now it's just keep it going.
It reminds me of Trump. Trump's the sort of classic counter-puncher. If he gets attacked, he tries to hit people back harder.
And it doesn't matter what he says.
Yeah.
It could be nonsense, but he's just going to continue to go after them. One thing I was going to say, you're saying, he can't apologise, he can't back down. And, if you're Nigel Farage, even though I think he should apologise, he's not going to. But what was interesting was at the same press conference yesterday where he played this video and said what he said, I'm not going to repeat it again, but during the questions from journalists, a journalist asked about a specific local campaign down in England where they had portrayed 3 female Labour cabinet members as cows and said, they are being taken or ready for the abattoir. And Nigel Farage was asked, given the kind of climate towards politicians, there's been high profile attacks, deaths of MPs, you know, is it sensible to have this sort of campaign material? And Nigel Farage actually said, you know, well, things happen in local campaigns. I'm not across everything, you know, and sometimes things do slip through the net, or sometimes they're not up to our standards, whatever. So, you know, he did apologise for that.
I didn't see that. So he,
yeah. So he is willing to acknowledge some things that are maybe wrong in his view, but in this case, he's not willing to acknowledge it. And to me, that says that he A, thinks that advert is completely fine, and B, that I'm not saying he was there, you know, editing the video clips and writing the script or whatever of this advert, but
dropping
I do think
cigarette
that
ash on the keyboard.
Oh, yeah, but
He was revelling in it, basically.
I do think that he knew about it before yesterday. He probably was aware of it, and you know, it's not surprising because this is the kind of thing we've seen from
It's different
other parties of Nigel Farage.
Just over a week out, he can't back down. Whereas there's no elections coming up in England, he can perhaps take a more reasonable approach.
Yeah.
So I think it's just politics. You know, it's theatre, it's politics. Whether he knew about it in the first place or not, he's realised I'm getting attention. There's the oxygen of publicity, so I'm just going to keep pushing this.
Because as well, like if he starts apologising, then it will lead to, you know, are you going to withdraw the advert? Are you going to resign? Are you going to cancel your withdraw your candidate? You know, and he does not want to go down that road.
I think also the fact the SNP are jumping in and complaining to Meta and asking for an apology should set alarm bells ringing with Labour that the SNP also want to keep talking about this.
Yeah.
Anas Sarwar should just say, look, it's water off a duck's back. I don't care. I don't want to talk about it anymore.
Yeah.
I'm not discussing it in interviews.
Yeah, although I think the last 24 hours, Anas Sarwar has jumped into it. You know, his reaction to it has dominated. Whereas I did get the impression he was maybe trying to keep out of it a little bit. It's one of the few occasions where Anas has actually led the debate in the by-election because, let's face it, they've been pretty sleepy so far. But if I was him, I'd be pretty uncomfortable that this is what's getting him in the news, a focus on ethnicity and horrible stuff like this. Ultimately, this does not benefit him.
No, but also you don't have to be an Anas Sarwar to feel uncomfortable about it. I feel bloody uncomfortable about it. You know, I don't think that he should be having to defend something that he's said that's been taken out of all context and framed in a certain way, all because of the colour of his skin. This is what Nigel Farage Reform want, is to sort of target Anas Sarwar, associate him with, issues about ethnicity and minorities, and is he really prioritising minorities over whoever else? It's all this. It's this othering of Anas Sarwar. It's trying to make him seem like, he's not really Scottish, is he?
Exactly. There was a similar thing a few months ago that was doing the rounds. I think it was like a fake video which claimed that Anas Sarwar does not like Billy Connolly. Did you see that? I mean, he's a massive Billy Connolly fan, but I think there were made-up quotes and whatnot. Yeah. And, again, the subtext is, this guy's not like us.
Well, I mean, Hamza, when he was First Minister, he was subject to, he's obviously still subject to the same things, but when he was First Minister, he got horrifically abused and attacked. And it was a similar thing, and a lot of it was sort of fabricated stuff or altered voice, what's it called, AI and things. And, I'm not saying it was Reform putting this stuff out, but it was a lot of these sort of far-right groups just trying to spread disinformation and make it seem like, these people are taking over and they're not really one of you.
I think from my point of view, the video doesn't say what, Anas Sarwar didn't say what the video says. He said, no. I think, it's frustrating because the SNP are defending this seat. Mm-hmm. It's the SNP's seat to lose. The SNP are in government in Scotland. This is an election for a Holyrood MSP. This is to do with all these parts of devolved life that the SNP run: schools, roads, police, hospitals, etc., that I would argue are failing under the SNP. And and yet you've got the parties that are vying for second and third kind of attacking each other. I'm not saying...
I think it's a set-up to... Not a set-up, but it's like a precursor to what we're going to see more
next
of
year, maybe.
coming
Absolutely.
up to next year. So, you know, when you say it like that, it does kind of seem odd. Like,
Why are Reform going after Labour? It's not their seat.
Because they want to be in second place. They want to leapfrog the Conservatives and Labour.
Yeah, but I think we are going to see a lot more of this kind of thing as the Holyrood elections come closer. But also, what you were saying as well about the SNP kind of complaining to Meta, you know, and the SNP potentially wanting this. Was it you who was saying that? Wanting it to be discussed? You know, I think that the only person who should be not having an opinion, but the focus of this should be on Anas Sarwar and giving him the space to say what he has to say about it and move on. I don't think that, you know, the SNP's chief executive making a formal complaint to Meta, as if that's going to actually bloody do anything. You know, if you feel that strongly about it, go and report it to the police, and, you know, don't go and leak it to a friendly journalist while you're doing that.
Please do.
I just feel like it's kind of making political capital out of the situation when actually it's not their issue to make. You know, fair enough, yes, political figures should all be coming out and condemning this as racist, but I don't think the SNP should be taking up the mantle and saying, oh, Anas, we will defend you. I just find that very odd.
Okay, second by-election issue. John Swinney said, I think on Monday, that it's a three-horse race between the SNP, Labour and Reform.
So we've added a horse.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of folk think it's a two-horse race between Reform and the SNP, but according to John Swinney, it's currently a three-horse race. I think people are dubious about that, or sceptical, because of how awful the Scottish Labour campaign has been. In particular, the candidate Davy Russell, who is not going to be taking part in a candidates debate on STV on Monday night. He was nowhere to be seen on GMS yesterday when other candidates were being quizzed about the by-election. It just looks terrible for Labour, this, doesn't it? You know, if you're a by-election candidate, you have to do media. It's part of the deal. And this guy, he's not quite in hiding. He's done a couple of huddles, but the stuff that you expect candidates to do, he's just not doing it.
Yeah, I think, you know, fair enough, he has been a sort of local government worker for a long time. It's not like he's been a councillor who's used to being a politician. That's not the case. And something like a televised debate is going to be quite daunting and actually very difficult to do. But as you say, he's done these huddles. The GMS thing was a one-to-one interview. It would have been a tough interview, but a one-to-one interview. You know, if you have somebody who's not able to just be asked questions and answer them, you know, why the hell are you putting them up to be an MSP? How are they going to make, you know, have debates in Holyrood, make their argument on for or against certain points? You know, how are they going to interact with constituents if they're not really able to kind of have that level of dialogue? And, you know, from speaking to various people who actually worked with David Russell while he was in the council, I think it's not just like, I don't think it's the case that Labour are scared to put him up and be questioned. Like, I think that when he was in the council, it's not like he was the most vocal kind of public speaker or anything like this either. So it could be that he's maybe got like a bit of an issue with public speaking, but you would think that if that's the case, don't put them up to be an MSP when there are other options.
You wonder about the selection process.
Yeah.
You know, I think last year, the general election, there was some really strong candidates put forward. Presumably there were quite a few who didn't get elected, who you know, could have had another crack at this. I think Labour maybe looked at Davy Russell's CV more than his personality. You know, he's the Lord Lieutenant of... When
you say Labour looked at it?
Or someone within Labour, you know, I don't know whoever did the selecting.
Yeah.
You know, he's the Lord Lieutenant. He's got this high-profile social position. He's had a high-flying career in the council. He's been business partners with Barry Ferguson. I think that's correct to say. You know, he's kind of got a really good CV. People go, oh, he sounds... But, you know, they obviously didn't stress test him through enough interviews.
Imagine the optics as well on Monday of the STV debate, where you've got Reform and the SNP going head-to-head at a by-election candidates debate, and it's like an empty chair for Labour.
Yeah.
I mean,
wonder
it
what
looks like they've given up.
Yeah, it's not a good look at all. I wonder if STV will replace Davy Russell with something. Remember that?
The tub of lard on Have I Got News for You?
No, or the melting block of ice when Boris Johnson didn't turn up on Channel 4. Do you remember that? And they got a complaint. So I'm wondering what STV could replace Davy Russell with. Like a wilting rose.
I was at the huddle. I was at the huddle last
Petals
week.
just fall off.
The huddle last week with Davy Russell, and this is when he confirmed that he wouldn't be taking part in the STV debate, and he said that he would prefer to be chapping doors. But this debate takes place at 10:40 p.m. So if he's chapping doors, he's going to need a torch, and if he's chapping doors at that time, he's going to get done for breach of the peace.
Yeah.
So I mean, the whole thing is ludicrous.
I think he just wants to be in the pub doing karaoke at that time of night. Personally, that's what
Talking
I
to
think.
Graham Souness about the glory days of
Yeah.
Well, that's maybe
Rangers.
do a cut out Graham Souness in sort of 80s Rangers kit. I think, you know, it's a shame because Katie Loudon, in my opinion, is not a particularly impressive candidate, but she puts herself out there. Obviously, this is her second big by-election, having lost in Rutherglen.
I think it's the third time she's been
But-
up for...
And she stood for... But I think in the Westminster election, there wasn't a focus on Rutherglen, so she probably didn't speak to national media. Maybe occasionally, you know, spoke to the local press. I mean, I think in the local area, Davy Russell's seen as quite a good communicator to our, you know, local reach titles down there. I just think maybe Labour are thinking, I mean, maybe it's not his decision. This is the thing. Maybe someone said, right, I don't like this guy. He's not going on TV. So maybe it's not him backing out. He's been told he's...
Yeah, it's weird though, because it's not just the live interviews, broadcast interviews, etc., that he's not being put up for. You know, if you look at the communications press releases that Scottish Labour are sending out, you know, there's things they're putting out about local issues or about, you know, certain things that Katie Loudon might have said or the Reform candidate. And the comments that are contained within those press releases, they're all from Jackie Bailey.
I know, it's like the candidate is Jackie Bailey.
That is not from Davy Russell. And
Even
I just
on-
wonder in the huddle that you went to, you know, what was he, for those of us who weren't fortunate enough to attend, how did he come across? What was he, you know, was there some great...
He made a couple of gaffes. So he described the SNP candidate Katie Loudon as Katie Forbes, and Anas Sarwar to correct him on that. That's not a hanging offence. But on the winter fuel payment, the huddle was about an hour before PMQs when Keir Starmer made his U-turn. And I think the Labour position broadly is that they want to increase the number of pensioners that are going to get the winter fuel payment compared to the Reeves plan. But Davy Russell said that he wanted Keir Starmer to reintroduce the winter fuel payment to all pensioners across the UK. Now, that may or may not be a good position, but that's not the Labour position. So I think he was a little bit off-piste with that one as well. So I can see why Labour handlers don't want him to be in front of the media, because I think he's uncertain, to say the least.
I think they've just mucked this up. I think they've picked the wrong guy or gal.
I think it was unwinnable, but I think that they could have maybe had an honourable defeat, like a decent second. But with a
Well, it's
poor
the fact
candidate, they might actually come third.
Well, yeah, but also look at the amount of publicity that Reform are getting because Labour are nowhere to be seen. There's damage there as well.
But when Davy Russell was selected, Reform were nowhere.
Yeah.
You know, so he was probably selected. Labour thought, we're never going to win this seat. Let's just get, you know, a good local guy, Rangers man.
Yeah.
You know, he's got some sort of royal appointment position for Lanarkshire. He's a good, solid Lanarkshire guy, and he's going to finish a solid second, and that'll do for us.
Yeah.
I mean, just to say about the 2-horse race, before I came in, I checked the latest odds. So I thought I might have a quick bet on reform. But the bookies have got the SNP runaway odds-on favourites and Labour, and then Reform, sort of a distant second and third. Sometimes the UK bookmakers aren't quite as plugged into Scottish politics, but it would be unusual for them to be that wrong. So I just wonder if the SNP know they've got this in the bag, and the kind of John Swinney is just trying to hammer home the advantage and make sure that every SNP voter, there's no complacency, get every voter out to make sure they get a strong win.
And maybe make sure that Labour are the story after polling day by pushing them into third.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I do think that the fact that John Swinney has been out to the constituency twice in the last week, and then Nicola Sturgeon was there the weekend before, to me, that's not, they just want to solidify their position as first. I actually do think that they're worried about reform.
You'd expect
I agree.
the party leader to campaign in a by-election.
I don't know, was he there 2 days in a row?
I don't know. I mean,
He's certainly been there.
Definitely there on Monday. I'm not sure if he was there Sunday or Tuesday.
He was there on Saturday and he was there on Monday. Nicola Sturgeon was there the previous Saturday.
Nicola Sturgeon managed to make it, surprise, surprise, all about her. And she did her message was, look at these great policies, and every single one of them was a Nicola Sturgeon policy. And you're like, okay.
Well, she also had a lot to say about reform, and I did think that, it was actually quite interesting what she was saying. But,
Right, look, just wrapping it up. There's about a week to go before the big vote, so let's have some predictions. Who's going to come first, second, and third? Start with you, Ben.
Well, I'm going to go with the bookies for first. I think the SNP will win it. I think the SNP were always going to win it. Second, I think Reform might pip Labour. Obviously, the momentum seems to be with them, and I think Labour will be third, and I think those three will be way ahead of everyone else.
Hannah?
I'm going to say SNP 1, Reform 2, but I'm going to say Labour potentially 4th.
Surely not.
Well, potentially. I just think that it's been so appalling, but then it's a by-election to people are not as kind of politics nerds as us, and they don't pay that much attention. So maybe, Labour definitely number 3 at least.
I'm going to say SNP 1. Right now, I'm going to say SNP 1, Labour 2, Reform 3, but that could definitely change in the next week, given that Farage is up. We've got the SDV debate with the Labour no-show, and what one journalist described to me as Reform's dark energy. I might flip the Labour and Reform on Wednesday's podcast, but right now,
see if the dark energy
takes hold.
Yeah.
But it's been some campaign. Even by Scottish by-election standards, it's been a doozy.
No, it's been good.
All right, I think that wraps it up. So thanks very much to Hannah and to Ben again for joining me. You can listen to this episode of Planet Holyrood on Spotify or Apple Music, or watch it on the Daily Record YouTube channel. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and TikTok for the latest news and the best bits of the podcast.
We will never turn our back on a single Scot.
We've got to wrestle with those challenges.
This is the same nonsense we have heard time and time again.
This is our country. Let's fix it together.